It really is a key, and you should really establish that you're a solid player that doesn't have shit in his hand very often. Uh, no one's ever going to think, oh man, he only plays really good cards. It's limit poker. They know damn well that sometimes you got some bullshit over there. But if they're a good player, they'll be able to get away from things on you. And you're not really after the other good players. You're after the fun player. You're after the wreck player. You're after the people that are just sitting there having fun. Those are the ones you want to just keep funding your poker thing. So that'll cover that. We are going to go on to uh, aggressive poker and why you should use it. We've sort of covered this before with because I find myself doing this a lot of times late in tournaments. I will really turn into a nit, and I really should. If I could get away from that, I'd be better. I'd get dinged a little more often, but it would be worth it. um, in a if you are four-handed on a no limit table and you have 8-6 of spades in the big blind and under the gun raises, get a caller from mid position and the cutoff also calls, you lose more money in the small and the big blind than anywhere else. It's just a fact of poker. Even top players uh, are losing players in those two positions. Nobody ever makes a ton of money unless you just won a tournament from the small blind. You know what I mean? Like your stats, trust me, they're mediocre at best at that level. From time to time, you're going to hit a big one and you stack somebody that had a big hand. Yay for you. But over time, you're just generally going to lose money in those two positions. And what you need to learn in those two positions are what hands to play, when, and against who. Now, I would call with 8-6 of spades there. I would call with almost any suited connectors, one gappers. But if it was reversed and the cutoff didn't have, here I don't think I told you what the hands were. Ace King raised under the gun. Ace Queen called from middle position. King 10 offsuit called from late position, cutoff. If I had the King 10 instead of the 8-6, I might fold that there. King 10 is dominated by so much that raises from early position that it's not worth it. 8-6, on the other hand, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely he's raising with 8s or 6s. He could be, and you could be dominated that way, but that percentage is way, way down. All right, send me a thing, and I will read off top 10 and play music, and then we'll get back to this. If you heard me in 30 seconds. I don't know if you heard me in real life with this big foam thing up in front of us.
No, I was listening to Deja and reading stuff.
No, she didn't hear me. All right, we're just going to play some music. This is Motley Crue, The Wild Side. That was a little Blackstone Cherry and the Rambler. If yeah, you guys have just started, so this should still be pretty current. Dead Broke 1 in first. Ace is over easy in second. Big Bad John in third. VDOGchuck in fourth. Kirsch VDOG in fifth. Bottle Up 74 in sixth. Alley QOD in seventh. Great Baldini in eighth. Walter Reinhardt in ninth, and Deadfish in 10th. Truckmaster, Call Me Floppy, S. Brook, Mike in Mississippi, One Fiery House, and Island Time are all still alive. And Japata, Zayden, Whatever, and Rain of Fire have all been knocked out already. So let's get that back into the VDOG chat so that I can see things there. And I was going over aggressive poker. And part of what I'm going to go over is if people think you're having a fire sale on your bankroll, they're going to line up to try to get into hands with you. And so part of the things you want to do as a player is make people think that you're a little reckless with the way you play. And to do that, the best way to do it, to try to minimize your losses so that you're not calling with shit hands in the wrong spots. You want to try and call with your shit hands out of the blinds, but you want to make them profitable hands. So 7-2 is still not something you should defend with, but you should also base it off of who the raise is coming from, how many people are in the pot, so forth. If the raise is coming from under the gun, they're more likely to have a better hand, and you can just let your hand go and move on to the next. If it's been folded around and it's a button range raise, and you know they're very situationally aware. You can make a little looser of a call there defending your blinds. But in the hand that I was talking about before break, ace king versus ace queen versus king 10 versus 8-6. Four-handed, you're 30% to win that hand with 8-6. Part of that reason is because one of his ace king, one of his aces is gone, and one of his kings is gone. You don't know that, obviously. But in that scenario, ace queen is 18% to win, king 10 is 17% to win, and 8-6 is 30% to win. And then the other thing that this helps you do when you should call with more than just one gappers, but this situation is going to help you appear more aggressive. You're not really being aggressive by defending your big blind with pot odds to do so. That's a given. But people will always see the end result of this hand and judge you by it. Whether it's right or wrong, and most good players, like when I see a hand and I watch it all the way through and I'm not involved in it, I would know at the end of this hand if 8-6 wins and beats ace king, I'm going to know why he was in the hand. I'm not going to go, oh, hey, that dude's cray-cray, calls anything, get it in with him. Because I'll know that that's not the case. All he did was defend his blind with a reasonable hand, and he hit. Now, even if ace-king is actually ace-ace, your percentage only drops to 20%. And part of the reason you want to defend with hands like this is if they do have aces or they do have ace-king and that flop hits you hard, or they have kings or queens even, and that flop hits you hard, you are more likely to stack somebody as opposed to get stacked. Obviously, they can resuck out with an ace on the river to get you. But what I'm saying is, if the flop comes ace, king, 3, you're not going to shove your 8-6 all in and get stacked. But if the flop comes 8-6-10 or 8-6 queen, there's a good chance you're stacking the aces. So your implied odds are higher over time, obviously not just in each individual hand, but over time your implied odds are much better there. And like I said, if those hands were switched, if the cutoff with the king 10 was you in the big blind, that would be a fold in my book anyway, because you're dominated by so much. You're dominated by ace 10, you're dominated by ace king, you're obviously dominated by aces and kings. And all you can really do is get yourself in trouble, because if that flop comes ace 10, 5, you're calling. You're going to lose more money, even though you're pretty sure you're beat. But, what if he's only got 9s? People will talk themselves into calling with that king 10 out of position much more than they should. And you can help alleviate some of the losing that you do in defending the big blinds by being a little more judicious with what you defend them with and trying to make that help you appear more aggressive. That's not to say you shouldn't call king 10 there sometimes, but just be able to get away from it on terrible hands. Because 1 in a million times you will hit king, king flop. So make sure you call every once in a while, just in case. like I said, stop doing the marginal hands that you think can outflop somebody. You're only going to get in trouble when you call with Queen Jack and you hit that queen and he does have his aces. You need to be able to play it and get rid of it after the flop if you understand your beat. But over and over again, I see too many times that, Queen Jack defends their big blind. The end of the gun, they check. The flop comes queen high, they check. The c-bet comes out there, gets check raised, and then that other guy shoves all in. And I go, damn, he's got king queen or queen jack, and the other dude's got aces or kings. And sure enough, it gets flipped over that way because you're not teaching me a lesson with king queen. Oops. And yeah, sometimes they suck out and crack the aces, but most times they don't. And so now you're stacked and having to rebuy into the tournament because you defended with queen jack. I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying understand after when you check raise and he comes back at you, he's got the overpair. You're done. If you want to just leave it up to the random number generator, feel free, but you should know your beat. But conversely, if you got the 8-6 and you hit that hard, it's a lot harder for that other guy to see, but it's much easier for you to see, and you will stack somebody more than you get stacked because you just won't get it in, and you're not dominated post flop. There is a way to try to to have a reckless image without actually being reckless. I don't know how many of you guys watch Gus Hansen. He's not really on TV very much anymore, but back in the day, they just used to call him a gambler, and he'll just get it in with any two and this and that. And if you really go back and look at some of the hands he's ever played, he is never that much of a dog when it gets all in. Like, he could really read people well, but he had that image where nobody was going to let him push them around. And it really helped when he had big hands. And you'd see TV doesn't want to show when Gus Hansen has pocket kings and he beats somebody with pocket sevens. That's not good TV. But they would show when he had, queen seven, and he flopped a queen and a seven, and he stacked somebody with kings, and it just made him look like he was a willy-nilly type player, when in reality he raised the queen seven. Another aggressive player raised them, and it just was so happened they had kings. But that person very well could have had king nine re-raising them, and he knew that. So that's why he called with queen seven, and he was deep stacked. And so sometimes when you get into a spot where you know it's a coin flip, sometimes it's best to get into those coin flips and let people see and get stats on you doing that. Because it will make it easier for them down the road to call when you have a bigger hand. I know I try not to, in my poker tracker, I try not to just look at, oh man, I've seen 80 some hands with them, but only one of them went to showdown where I could see what it was. Well, in that one time, it was a shitty hand. I can't very well say, oh, that guy's a shitty player. It's one hand that I got to see out of 86. And, he cracked somebody with a shit hand. But a lot of people do treat that HUD and treat the one time they saw you do something. They tend to remember those more memorable things. And so it's to your benefit sometimes to try to do coin flips when you know it's a coin flip. It's much easier to do after you've seen the flop, like where you have a draw or you know you have a little bit more information. But sometimes having somebody know that you will shove pocket sixes or you'll call with ace jack is just as valuable down the line as it is in the tournament you're in. And now, saying that, like, you shouldn't just have your stack size should play a little bit into when you're doing that kind of stuff too. I.e., it doesn't hurt you that much against the people behind you still to act, or vice versa. Hey, you're at 22 big blinds. It's a little awkward anyway. You need chips to get there. Make there be an alternative motive behind it as well. I'm not just saying go sign up for 4 tournaments right now and jam some shit cards right off the bat to make yourself a reckless player. But just over time, doing certain things can help your image do that. We are going to move on to the next little thing I'm going to do, the check raise. A check raise is when you check, then somebody else behind you bets, and then you raise behind them. And it's generally a trapping move. It can be done for lots of reasons. You can be doing it for value. You flopped a set. The other person's an aggressive player. You got an overpair to the board. And you generally think you have the best hand. It can also be used as a bluff to make your opponent throw away the best hand. And a lot of times, the best way to do that, I have found, is if you're especially out of the big blind or the small blind, where your ranges are a little bit wider, and let's say, you just have, you got 9-8, and the flop comes Jack 6-2, and so you check, and then your opponent goes ahead, throws out a C bet. If you check raise them there, let's say they have pocket 10s, they might just say, hey, he hit that jack, he hit 2 pair because of his, where he's at. You might get pocket 10s to fold there. You might not either, but that's a good spot to try in. They also might just have ace king, and they might not want to go any further. They were just trying to get you out of the pot too. The worst thing you can do there is probably call on your runner straight, but you do at least have a little something that you could back into, because you will get called sometimes, and then if you hit the open ender in either direction, you can then see bet out and put them in a really tough spot to try to see whether they're good or not. You know what I mean? An ace king is probably going to fold to a bet there, because they're certainly not going to want to call a healthy bet without a made hand. You never know, though. Sometimes they do. And that's an obvious spot to do it. But you need to know why you're doing it as opposed to when. When is some good information to have as well. Like, that's the most important. But why is just as important when you're check raising. You do not want to check raise a calling station. They're just going to call you as a bluff anyway. You definitely want to do it to them when you've got it, because they're going to call you down anyway. Try not to vary your check raising. A lot of times I see people just check raise the amount of the bet. And a lot of times that is just not enough to get somebody to believe that what you're trying to sell. And I have found over time that if I do it 2 times, or a little less than 2 times, or a little more than 2 times, I get more folds from people that way. And so what I lose when I do hit a set and I check raise like that, I gain in being able to bluff that same way. And so I find that that's my happy medium, but whatever you decide to do, you should try and do it the same for your value check raise and your bluff check raise. You don't want to do it in such a way that they can tell which is which. And you also need to double check and make sure if you get re-raised back that you're not getting nailed. And I see a lot. It's hard to dodge. I dodged one about a week ago, and I was so tickled pink that I was right. I had 3s, and I was in mid position, and somebody under the gun raised, and I just flat called, and then 2 more people came along, and then the big blind completed. So there were like 5 or 6 of us in the pot. And I hit my 3 on the flop. And it checked around, so I checked it. And the guy in position raised. The small blind got out of the way. The guy under the gun called. Then I re-raised. I did the check raise. The other guy got out of the way, and then the guy under the gun 4-bet me. He re-raised me again. And I sat and I thought about it, and thought about it, and thought about it. And I went, you know what? I don't think he has an overpair. Like, something didn't feel right. If he had an overpair, if he'd have shoved all in, I might have called. But he just check raised me after I check raised the other guy. And I found it funny, and I thought, and I went ahead and folded it. And I was so glad, and he showed me he had hit 8s. He had hit a set as well. And part of that, when I say watch what other people bet and try to figure out what they have, I really thought if he had an overpair, he would just be more than happy to get that in. You know what I mean? Like, that would be his spot to go, hey, I'm doubling up here. I got aces. He didn't want me to go away. And I could just feel that he didn't want me to go away. And so I folded a set of threes. And I don't know why he showed, but he did, and I was thankful for it. I appreciated the information, but that's just part of some of the things you have to do in post flop play to not just dodge things, but to understand betting is information, and you need that and you need that information to.
Rude.
It was, but it tasted fucking good. It was like an extra bite of chili there. Uncle Slacker there. That's what that was. But bets are information, and you need that information to get what you need. And I find, especially online, I don't know if there's just an article out there somewhere that says online check raising is how people bluff these days or what, but I very rarely do it with the bluff. Boy, but I do the piss out of it with some good hands because people call all the time. They just don't believe a check raise online. And I don't know why, but man, I check raised the fuck out of some shit when I got the nuts because I don't know if they can't figure out the odds on it or they just don't believe you any other time or they're ready to buy back in or whatever the deal is. But just the other day, I flopped the straight flush and I checked it and dude bet. I check raised him. He called and then he called every bet right on down and he only had ace high. He called my check raise and then called me down with ace high and he didn't even have the suit. It was spades. He didn't even have that suit. Like I was sort of hoping for another one because I thought maybe he had the ace of spades. He didn't even have that. He had like the ace of diamonds and the 10 of hearts or something. And I was like, yay, I guess. I don't know. Another thing that is rarely used, and this is generally how I bluff with it, it's actually a semi-bluff. And so I might check raise, a flush draw to try to get a free card afterwards. Or allow me to do it again. You know what I mean? Like, so there's two diamonds on the board, and I check, and the other guy bets, and I check raise as a semi-bluff because I have the flush draw. Now, when the flush hits, if it hits on the turn, you can check again, and if the other person isn't too bright, they'll go, here, I can bluff him off his better hand. Because now he believes me. Now he believes that I check raised him with an overpair because I quit betting when the flush got there. So he thinks I was trying to get him off the flush, when in reality, I just did it so that I could check raise again. Because they'll bluff at it when the flush gets there, thinking you checked because you had an overpair or a set or whatever, and you can get them a second time. And then even if they check and it gets to the river, you can then bet, and it might look like you're not as strong as you were. It hides your hands very well, and a lot of people don't equate a check raise with a drawing hand. Most times they equate it with an overpair or a set, and so when you use it properly on a semi-bluff, you can really get some good value out of that. Obviously, the deck's got to hit you as well, but you can also, even if you miss, bet back out at it. And a lot of times you can get people to fold pretty easily that way. Not super easy, but they will fold more times than you think. Set mining in poker.